Hey everybody, this is Erica Mello, and welcome to episode number 215 of Tough to Treat. And this is a short episode on one of my patients who I saw probably about some months ago now. And I know if you've been listening to us for a while, you'll know how important the power of the story, or how important the story is, and what we can do as clinical experts in terms of teasing out parts of the person's story and making our assessments more efficient. And there was an episode I did a while back, and then there was a few that Susan and I did together on the power of the narrative. So I honestly, I can't emphasize this enough. It's so important that we listen, but we start to prioritize in our brain, and we use our clinical reasoning skills to look at the person's timeline, look at their history, and correlate that with what the person's telling us before we even touch them. So this is a story about a patient who was has a desk job here in New York City right now, but he was a former military, Army infantry for the United States, and also former informal and formal fighter. And you'll be very interested to listen, especially to the end, because there was a point that we're talking about push-pull here, and there was a point that the push was amazing and the pull was not so amazing. And so I want you to clinically reason along with me in this episode and see if we come up with the same opinion. Whenever you're listening to us, we truly appreciate, or wherever you're listening to us, Susan and I really appreciate it. We would really like you, if you have not left us a review on wherever you listen to podcasts, it would be great if you could do so. If you found value with the podcast, or on YouTube, we're now on YouTube now. For those of you who are new to us, our website is toughtotreat.com, and as I said, we're at 215 episodes. Just go into the website and type in the search bar, whatever region of the body or area you're interested in, and see how Susan and I solve some interesting clinical puzzles. So happy start to the summer, and look forward to seeing you on our next episode, and enjoy this one. Everybody, this is Erica Mello, and welcome to episode number 215 of Tough to Treat. And this is a short episode, as I mentioned in the intro, about a patient of mine who I saw some months ago, former military infantry and Army infantry, and has a desk job here in New York City, but a lot of formal and informal fighting, boxing. And so just from that story, I mean, I've only said not even 30 seconds of his narrative. What are we thinking? He's coming in with left sort of shoulder pain, left upper trap pain, unable to do a push-up or a pull-up. Very different movements, right? Push, pull, very different drivers, very different regions of the body are stressed, right? So what do we know, number one, about, I would say, military, right? A lot of carrying, right? This particular patient had jumped out of helicopters and fractured several ribs. Okay. Not painful now. This was some years ago now, but right then and there, you're thinking, you guys got left upper trap pain, left sort of posterior cuff pain, can't do a push-up, and can't do a pull-up, same symptom. And so fractured ribs, obviously you have to put your thorax in your brain. You also have to put shoulder in your brain, right? Boxer, fighter, anything that jumps out at you, right? Fighter, I'm putting right into the screen here. So fighter, in his narrative, he told me that he, had several, issues with wrists and elbows over the years. And actually he taped his wrist. All fighters tape their wrists up, right? So when someone's taping their wrist up for a chronic sort of movement, or not a chronic movement, but a movement they do a lot of, it's a lot of this, right? And so their wrists they can't really extend or flex their wrists for obvious reasons, right? But where are they going to compensate? What's the next joint up? Okay. So this guy's coming in with left shoulder, upper trap pain, And you're saying, Erica, what are you talking about? Wrist, elbow? Yes. Okay. But think about what are the requirements of the sports that he's done. I don't care if it's 25 years ago. These people will develop a dominant strategy that they will carry throughout their life events, whether it's sitting in the car, carrying their children, or just plain walking down the street. And so if you learn anything from this short episode, think about what your patient has done a lot of and what is that dominant movement pattern. So for example, I think we did an episode on him. I had a patient some years ago who was a rower, left sweep, left, left, left. He was so far to the left in standing, it was crazy. I mean, I'm not kidding. And clearly there's a connection there, right? And so I want you to make the connection between the person's narrative and their story. Okay. So he couldn't do a push-up or a pull-up. So what I do at my skill level, I'm able to assess a push-up on the wall. And so it's really hard as a therapist to go down. You could watch the person do a push-up on the floor, very hard to get your hands on them and for them to do a repeated push-up without you or your patient moving non-optimally or injuring yourself, right? So I'm okay to do a wall push-up. If you're not at that level, you could easily assess like, a single arm lift, right? Not the same load, but at the very least, watch your patient. Or you could just do what I say, like like an air push-up, right? Have them do this right into the screen there. So they can just do an air push-up. Okay, that's also great. I think we can all assess that, right? So when he did a wall push-up, and it was his left shoulder, he was, like this. Not uncommon with what he was coming in with. But, it was a lot of medial compression at the shoulder joint, a lot of compression in his upper thorax. I'm glossing over a lot of his medical history because I want to just get to the point here. So, a lot of compression, as I said, just a lot of medial compression in the shoulder. And it was worse wide. So I assessed a wide base push-up, right? And a narrow based and even a diamond, like a diamond push-up, narrow. He was a lot better. Not optimal, but better. What does that tell you? So Susan and I often talk about base of support, center of mass for base of support in the arms, right? If the person has a wider base, in the feet, if the person has a wider base and they feel better with the wider base, their upper body can adapt better to that wider base, right? And so that means that there could be some driver in their lower extremity that makes them non-optimal when their feet are narrow. Same thing here. When you are wider, if you have a driver in your upper extremity, generally, the wider will be better. Not so in his case. Not so in his case, okay? But he was an anomaly. So this is why I wanted to bring him up. He was an anomaly. He did very well with his narrow base. And so I assessed him. I also assessed him with push-up bars, just, versus going into full wrist extension, okay? And on a push-up bar, wide, he was pretty good. So what difference? Think about what difference that is and just think about it. What's the difference between someone putting their hands on a push-up bar, like a tricep bar, basically, on the floor, and, I had him even off a decline. I had him on a decline push-up too, because I really wanted to stress it, versus just doing it, on the wall, which is less load, but with full wrist extension. Full wrist extension. What do you think? Right. And so, for the sake of the podcast, I'll move on. But think about wrist, elbow. He had, he told me that in the past he would put, sort of braces on his elbows. He'd feel a lot better for whatever reason. But as I said, I don't want to get into the whole history because Susan and I can do a long form podcast on him, but it's really about the clinical reasoning. Why is he better on the floor with push-up bars? Because his wrist is not an extension. Clearly he taped his wrists up when he was fighting, and he stabilized them for obvious reasons, as I mentioned earlier. but he when he went into this full wrist extension, was it neural tension? He didn't have a positive neural tension test in the sense that it reproduced symptoms, but he was limited. Why? Is that neural, or is that elbow or wrist? Is that thorax? Is that GH? Why? Okay, so I'm just going to stop you there. Just think about that. Then I assessed a pull-up. I have access to Pilates equipment in my office, and we have what's called a fuse ladder. And so I had him, he was able to pull up fairly okay. It was when he came down, that was his issue. So think about it again. You're assessing a push. Did I get up and stand behind him doing a pull-up? Not in the initial assessment, I didn't. I needed to watch. It's very hard to assess. It really is. So, but you can watch the person move. So he went up and did a basic, pull up. I think he was doing this arm grip. This arm grip, I think it was more this arm grip. He did a bunch of them during the initial assessment, and I videoed him. And when he went up, he was fairly centered. When he went down, okay, what's his left side? When he came down in the push-up, when the elbows were straightening. I'm doing a military press, but when the elbows were straightening, he veered way to the left. It's not really optimal when you're doing a pull-up, right? And so push up on the wall, a lot of compression here, thorax, GH. The negative on the pull-up, couldn't really extend the elbow wrist. So what did he do? He translated everything to the left. Is that consistent with what his story tells you? Yeah, it definitely is. And so in standing, his center of mass was way to the left. For whatever reason, he's not a lefty. It's just a dominant strategy. Once again, you need to know their history. You need to pick apart those sports or those activities they've done. And if if they say something to you like, those aren't relevant, and I'm like, well, they're all relevant, but I'm going to say, you played a lot of sports, I understand, over many years, and with those sports come injuries. Did you have any during that time? That's an easy way to sort of get them talking. And of course, everybody's had injuries when they play sports. Most of people do. You have to sort of correlate that. And that's what makes us experts at movement. We're physical therapists. We should be good at this, right? And so you want to correlate their story to their movement. So his drivers, I'm going to just talk about his upper. He had a little thing with his foot, but not relevant to what I'm talking about right now. He had a lot. One of his drivers was up in his upper thorax, a lot of compression, and a little bit in his shoulder. Those were his drivers. Susan and I can talk about the assessment on another day. And so when I went in and gave him a little bit of decompression and support in his thorax, and his GH, I just decompressed it a bit. He was able to do a push up a lot better. Okay, very hard for me to do that when he was doing a pull up. It's really hard to do that, obviously, right, logistically. So I tested him narrow, normal, wide again on the wall just to make sure everything was good, and he could do it a lot better. It wasn't perfect. Then I actually I assessed this we'll call it upper limb tension, right? It was better, but also not perfect. And so, but I got the most bang for my buck in the first several sessions with treating his thorax and his GH. Okay. I had him do push-ups on the floor with the bars. He was great with that. I'm going to fast forward because this is the reason why I wanted to mention this. His pull-up, his return from the pull-up was getting better, but it wasn't as good as the push-up. He got his push back very quickly because, I did a lot of push with him. Military press, cables, triceps are a really big weakness with people who have the thoracic issues. So we did a lot of isolated triceps. I did a lot of manual release in the wall position, like dynamic release, and also in supine. But I don't tend to do a ton of release passive after the first or two sessions. It's mostly dynamic, a lot of dynamic release where you can really engage the muscles, right? So did that. The pull up, he was still going to the left, but better. And so then I went back and I was like, okay, it's got to be something in the elbow. And so lo and behold, you just think about it. He was coming off the pull up and he could not lengthen. He couldn't lengthen. No major injuries per se in that elbow, but a way, like when I assessed, elbow extension, I palpated the muscles, did my traditional how we all learn it in school, elbow assessment. He had a lot of restrictions at that joint, a lot. Could it be from falls out of the helicopter or the plane, or when he was in the army? Could it be the fighting? It was definitely the fighting, right? A lot of over recruiting of brachioradialis, biceps, a lot of fascial restrictions at the joint line. And as therapists, the elbow issues that we tend to see, that are not operative, tennis elbow, golfer's elbow, things like that. This was not even anywhere near that. It was so fibrotic in that, and for whatever reason, I don't know, it's something to do with his history. But I ended up doing a lot of traditional fascial release in the elbow joint mobs, and worked on, honestly, and that's something I haven't done in the elbow in a while. It's not something I traditionally see. But when you're looking at the clinical reasoning pieces here, why is he going to that left? His drivers, his thorax, his GH, his glenohumeral were being treated. His push was much better. What was limiting him? For some reason, the pull-up, because it's a different muscle, because it's a different grip, I can't just have him like change the grip on the pull-up. I mean, I can, but changing the grip on the push-up was way easy to do. Took his wrist right out of it, right? So, and that should have clued you in, or clued me in, right? So I ended up doing a lot of I had him do, we have a Pilates reformer. I had him, I get on the reformer and just do a lot of, negatives, prone on the box, and do a lot of negatives. And I really did a lot of release and training on the elbow in that prone position on the box, on the Pilates reformer. You can have him do bicep curls, and, you can help up if you want, and just do low load, extension, the negative, to get that elbow to train with weight, with load. And it's open chain, but it's really hard to do closed chain at that point, on a home programming with you, and you actually releasing their muscle. So releasing the joint restriction. And I ended up doing also just, on the Cadillac, we have a bar, and I ended up doing, you can do this at home as well, with a TheraBand over their head, and just doing a lot of just extension of the elbow. And you could see he was like, if someone can't extend this elbow, they can't do it. So what are they going to do? They're going to do this, right? They're going to get down to the ground. If someone can't do this, they're going to do this to the same side. And that was consistent across movement patterns. And so, the pull up got significantly better after that. But the reason why I wanted to talk about him was elbows, elbow issues. He didn't have any elbow pain, but it was in his story. Okay. And so I cannot emphasize it enough. There's a bunch of episodes we talked about, that I think they're entitled "What to Do If Your Patient Plateaus." It's the same thing. He wasn't plateauing. It's just, it's the same thought process. Is there a secondary issue? Yeah, totally. For the pull-up, absolutely. At the push-up, less so. But I want you to start thinking out of the box when it comes to your patient's prior injuries in sports. Okay, does that correlate with what you're seeing? And so, I love treating patients like this. I think they're a lot of fun. And as I've been a physical therapist a long time, and it just really continues to be exciting working with these people. So, any questions, you know where to reach us. Our email is toughtotreatpt@gmail.com. And Susan and I will see you on the next episode. Bye, guys.